fascinating. Our second speaker is Harvey Fisher, and your evaluator is Sandip. And Sandip, can you give us Harvey's objectives and how many minutes his speech will be?
Sure. Harvey's speech is Project 11 from the manual, which is the entertaining speech. The title of his speech is Across America with Lynn. He has two objectives. The first objective is to entertain the audience by relating a personal experience. And the second objective is to organize an entertaining speech for maximum impact. The allotted time is 6 to 8 minutes.
Thank you.
By the way, Mickey taught a class in biblical theater. She's a terrific teacher, but I was a terrible student, so
You were
it
not.
worked out so well. But my story is, my wife to be Lynn was living in New York, and I was living in LA. And this was the summer of 1964, and we were conducting a long-distance relationship by letters and long telephone calls. And then after a while I said, you know, I think it's time to get serious, so why don't you come out to LA? And I was jubilant when she agreed that she would. The plan was that I was going to fly to New York from LA, and then take her car and drive across country. And I was flying, I had researched the whole plan. We were going to take, from New York, we were going to go to Chicago and take Route 66. Don't forget, in those days, no interstates. There was Route 66, and like in Nat King Cole's song, Get Your Kicks on Route 66, 2,000 miles from Chicago to LA. But when I got to New York, I found out Lynn had her heart set on going to New Orleans. Now this is the summer of 1964, which is the summer of Mississippi burning. This is the time when I think 4 children were killed in the 16th Street Baptist Church bombing. Freedom riders were being arrested and beaten. 3 civil rights workers had been murdered. And Lynn had a Volkswagen Bug with New York plates and a guitar sticking out the back. And I didn't think we would make it. But I couldn't disappoint her. I mean, this is, you know, whatever. So I said, okay, we'll go to New Orleans, but we're going to drive to Birmingham, Alabama, have dinner there, and then we're going to drive through the night till we get to New Orleans. And my idea was that even the Klan needs to get their sleep. So that's how it started off. And we headed off, and we camped in the Smoky Mountains in Tennessee. That was absolutely beautiful. And then on the way, we stopped at a farm stand, and the farmer was selling watermelon, chilled watermelon. And in summer, it was hot, and we pulled off, and we sat with the farmer and his wife, and had some wonderful, delicious watermelon. And we got to know each other. 2 city people with 2 farmers from Tennessee. And then we headed off to New Orleans, and we did all the things you do in New Orleans, the jazz club, eating Cajun food, and it was lots of fun. And then headed west through Texas. And everything was going great until we got to the South Texas plains, in the western part of Texas. And this is summer, and it was blazing hot. And the landscape is just brush, sort of white sand, tumbleweed, and the car engine burned up. And there I get out of the car, and I can't see anything from horizon to horizon except white sand, brush, and tumbleweed. So we had no water, and I thought we were going to die. And we found 2 desiccated people in this Volkswagen. But luckily, a young man stopped, and he towed us in. He had like a chain, and he towed us into the nearest town, and that town was Fort Stockton, Texas. We found a mechanic, and this was on a Friday, and the mechanic said, well, he had to send for parts to Odessa, Texas, which is 98 miles to the north. And the parts wouldn't come. He doesn't work on Sunday, so we would have the car probably on Monday evening. So we checked into a motel, but Lynn was very nervous because we weren't married, and she was very worried. In those days, it was not accepted for 2 single people to share a room. So I hid Lynn hid her hand behind her back. Unfortunately, the desk clerk was a young teenager who was more interested in listening to rock music, and we checked in. Well, then Lynn needed some toiletries, and I figured I'd walk into town to the drugstore. And as I'm walking, it is hot, I don't have a hat, and I started to get dizzy. And I made it to the drugstore, and there was a counter, a soda counter. And I went over and I asked for a tall glass of soda water, plain soda water, which in New York we used to call 2 cents plain. And she fills up the glass and she said, are you going to drink that? I said, yeah. And she said, well, it has no syrup. And everyone stopped in the store to watch me. Did you think I was about to eat a raw chicken or something? But I drank it, went back, and that night we went to the grocery store. We bought some steaks and charcoal because there was a park nearby, and we figured we'd barbecue out. And we started, and then we wanted some wine, and the grocery store guy said, well, Pecos County, by the way, Fort Stockton was the county seat for Pecos County, which has a very colorful past. And while we were barbecuing, we found there were a line of cars started to drive through the park, stop and look over at us and drive through. We didn't know what was going on. What we found out later was that the teenagers don't have anything to do in Fort Stockton, so they cruise. And they saw a couple in the park having a barbecue, so they wanted to see who it was. So they were just curious. Well, the next day, we saw there was a movie house in town. So we decided to go. It was a double bill. It was Pillow Talk and another movie, which I forgot. And there were 2 showings. So we went to try to go to the first, but we came in late, so half of Pillow Talk. So we're going to stay for the second show. And this theater had like king-back chairs. It didn't have the regular seats. And the owner of the movie house came over, and after the show, we were sitting there. We were the only ones there. And he said, what are you 2 waiting on? So I said, we're waiting for the second show. I said, I'm not going to show up for just you 2. So we headed off. But let me just say that Fort Stockton was a very colorful place. It had been the county seat of Pecos County. Is where the ranchers used to come to register their brands. It was a fort that protected the San Antonio, El Paso mail route and the Comanche Trail. And there was these beautiful homes that were the officers' quarters. So one thing about that trip was that Lynn and I got to know each other better. And I found her to be really see this whole thing as an adventure, which might have been distressing for someone else. And then she too enjoyed meeting the folks and the history of Fort Stockton. Thank you very much.